Have you ever wondered if a computer keyboard tray could be a good fit for your computing needs? Well, what if I told you the downsides could potentially outweigh the upsides? In this video, we're going to talk about the top 7 problems with computer keyboard trays to see if they're a good fit for your needs. Hi, I'm Greg with BTOD.com. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at one of the most popular ergonomic accessories, the computer keyboard tray. The first problem that we found with computer keyboard trays has to do with the knee clearance issue that we find with a keyboard tray. Now, when we think about the design of a keyboard tray, we want to look at where it's positioned underneath the desk. Now, you think of a surface here, the underside, we've got the thickness there, and then we look at a more bulky keyboard tray. This one is a little bit more thin in profile, but you can even see here with this, basically this tray is still going to be dropped down a few inches from the top side of your surface. And so for taller users or people that like to sit up a little higher in their chair, this is definitely going to pose a problem for those users. The first solution to the knee clearance problem is that it might not be a problem at all. And the reason why I say that is that when we look at how desks are being used today, if you're someone who does primarily computing tasks, we think about how our desk is set up, you might not actually need to stow the keyboard underneath the desks. But if you are a user who is going to be doing a lot more writing tasks, the alternative would be to look for something that is going to be a thinner profile. Something like this, you can see it's not as thick. And then to look at a keyboard and mouse that is not going to be as tall as, say, a natural Microsoft keyboard solution. The second problem that we found with keyboard trays is the limited amount of space that's provided on the actual tray itself. Now, this isn't going to be a problem for some people that are going to be having smaller keyboard and mouse combo setups. However, if you're someone who has a gaming setup like this one, or you have a split keyboard from Microsoft, you will find that some of the keyboard systems will be a little bit too narrow and not quite deep enough for your needs. The solution to the limited space available on your keyboard platform is first really going to be to find out how much space you require. My recommendation would be to look at the flat space that you're currently using with your keyboard and your mouse to get a good idea of the amount of space that you would think you would require, specifically width-wise first, and then secondly, how much depth you would require minus the front edge for a wrist support. Once you've decided how much space is going to feel good for your needs, then you can go ahead and look for some products that will fit that exact setup. My recommendation would be to look at single platforms, as they tend to be a little bit wider and better for larger keyboards and mice. The third problem that we've found with computer keyboard trays is that they can be a little bit awkward to use, especially if it's a user that's never had an opportunity to try out a keyboard tray before. Now, the reason for this is they tend to be a little bit restricted, especially because of their smaller size when compared to an entire desk's surface. Now, the second thing that we found that becomes a little bit awkward at first for people is the actual wrist rest itself. This is especially true when we look at thicker wrist pads for users that are using Apple products that have a much thinner profile keyboard, and PC users that are using thinner profile keyboards as well. And the same is true when we look at mouse usage. Now, when we have our mouse and we're using a wrist rest for that mouse, you can see that it's going to restrict your movement somewhat. And if you're someone who likes to move the mouse around quite a bit, this is probably going to be awkward at first for you. The fourth problem that we found with computer keyboard trays is that users tend to set them up incorrectly. Having grown up in a family that's manufactured and produced keyboard trays for almost my entire life, I've had quite a bit of opportunity to see how a keyboard tray is incorrectly set up and correctly set up. These products are being used throughout the local area, and one area in particular that we see them quite often is in the hospital. And this is a great example because when I go to the hospital, almost every single one of the keyboard trays is set up incorrectly. And what I mean by that is they tend to set them in a positive tilted position. Now, what this does is this actually is going to increase the stress on your wrist, which is going to be bad for you. And over time, we found that this can create health issues that will lead to discontinued use of the keyboard tray. The The solution for users incorrectly setting up their keyboard tray is really to look at two specific areas. The first is going to be the actual height of the keyboard tray. You're going to want to have the height of a keyboard tray be one that your arms rested at your sides naturally are going to allow your elbow and your upper arm to be in a 90-degree or slightly greater than, so that your hands can be just below your elbow. Now, the second thing you want to look at, as I mentioned before, is the way that the tilt is positioned on your keyboard tray. So what I mentioned before is a positive position is a bad position. So what we're looking for is either a neutral position or a slightly negative position, which will be much less stressful on your wrists. This is going to be a hard habit for a lot of users to break, especially if you've been doing it for a long time. But much like your office chair in slouching, if you get past it, you'll find that you'll be much more comfortable and your body will feel better once you've changed the bad habit. The fifth problem with computer keyboard trays is that they tend to be bouncy. And a lot of that stems from the actual design of a keyboard tray. So the first thing you'll notice here is that there's an extended arm that comes out to a platform. So the distance from where it's actually connected to the desk to the end of the tray is fairly significant. Now when we raise this up here and you see I push, you can see there's actually a fair amount of motion with the keyboard tray. The first solution to a bouncy keyboard tray is really going to be to start typing a little bit softer and not pushing quite as hard on your keyboard tray. Now I understand that bad habits form over a long period of time and it sometimes can be a little bit more difficult to break those habits. So alternatively, we do have a few different product solutions. First being the Myriad keyboard tray, which we sell. And you can see here it is a steel platform and it's actually two pieces of steel that are formed and then welded together, and it becomes a much more rigid product than something that would be like plastic or phenolic. Now, what I've also seen other manufacturers do is they use a thicker piece of wood, and a lot of times they're almost as thick as the surface on this desk. Now what that does is that's going to provide a lot more rigidity, much like the steel platform that we use on the Myriad tray. And then lastly, we look at products that are going to be almost similar to how a keyboard drawer would function. The New Heights XT Split work surface is a great example of this. It actually has two arms that extend off the sides of the surface. They're going to connect on the ends of the platform, and they're going to use, again, a surface that's very similar to this in thickness, and it provides a lot more stability for your keyboard platform. The sixth problem with computer keyboard trays is that quality can come at a cost. Now you can find lower cost units at big box stores and stores like Amazon, but what we find is that they'll always be made with lower quality components. Things like plastic for the actual platform, plastics in the mechanism. Now if you're looking for something that's going to be a good investment long term, you're going to want to look at something that's more commercial grade. Now our lowest cost unit, which we actually have on the desk here, is going to be around $159. They're going to go all the way up to about $240. So there is some difference from our lowest end unit up to our higher end unit, but the quality that you get with this product is much better than some of the things that you'll find in the big box stores. The solution for this problem is you can always go with a lower quality product, but if you're looking to make a long-term investment, something like our Myriad tray, which is made of steel, that will last you for 15 to 20 years, you're going to have to spend a little bit more money, but we feel confident that that product would last a lot longer for you than something that you would find for under $100 at one of the big box stores. The seventh problem that we found with computer keyboard trays is that width is not the only dimension that you need to be concerned with when mounting your keyboard tray. Depth is actually a big concern. The reason for it is that keyboard trays run on a track system. So when you see this keyboard tray, this is what allows it to slide back and forth underneath the desk. Now when we think about this track system, this one here is about 16.5 inches long. It needs to mount underneath the surface, just set back from the front edge. So you'll have to have about 17 inches for just this track system of unobstructed space in order to mount your track properly. Now this is not as big of a concern on traditional desks as it is on standing desks. Specifically, when you look at how a frame is designed, this is a C-leg design, but just beneath or next to the legs, running between the legs, there is actually a metal frame component. That is something that's very common across the entire standing desk industry. The solution for the depth problem with a keyboard tray is going to be first to really just measure twice. If you measure twice, hopefully we can avoid the problem altogether. Now, if you get the keyboard tray, or there's really no way around this problem, and you still want to mount a keyboard tray, the first thing that we found that a lot of our customers will do is they'll actually shim the track system and go past whatever's obstructing the track. Alternatively, you can always look at a solution that are fairly new to the industry. It's called a trackless keyboard system. And basically what this does is it eliminates the track system and it actually mounts underneath the front edge of the desk, and then it will almost fold on top of itself. So it won't give you the full sliding and stow action that you would get with your more common keyboard tray, but it will give you the tilting function that people do like with their keyboard trays. If you'd like more information on keyboard trays or ergonomic accessories, please feel free to visit the Learning Center at btod.com. Thanks for watching.